Ashel Elana Mary Landor of Leicester Carriacou, a former employee of Marine Protected Area, passed away on Sunday, November 6, 2022, at the age of 25. She was the mother of Marley Landor, daughter of Mary Julian and Bernard Landor, sister of Alan Alexander in England, Ariel and Akel Landor, and Kathleen Alexis in Carriacou, granddaughter of Cynthia Landor and Doreen Julian, companion of Quasim Nimrod, niece of Alistair Charles, Bernardine, Bernice, Brian, Dexter and Linton Landor, Ashlyn, Ashley and Fenric Julian, and Veronica Adams, niece-in-law of Rosalina Landor, Barbara Charles and Dominic Daniel, close friend of Shermaine McNeil, Randy Fraser, Ricardo Landor, Carmi, also known as Jojo, Carmen Phillip, Khadija Felix and Daniel Sylvester, Dr. Tyrone Davis, Dr. Sears and Nurse Coy, Veronica, Shermel, Christelle, and Javon Nimrod. Close cousin of many including Ricardo, Brenda and Emma Julian, Kira and Roshana Landor, Cordelia Charles, Megan, Katie, Kayla, Linton Jr., and Letitia Landor. Other relatives and friends including the Julian, Landor, and Joseph families, the Thorne family in Grenada, Sharon Bristol and family, the MPA family, Louise and Mayoni Joseph, Matthew Joseph and family, Brenda Samuelson and family, Emma Scott and family, teacher Yolande Placid, and friends and neighbors of Leicester and surrounding areas, too numerous to mention. The funeral of the late Ashel Elana Mary Landor of Leicester Carriacou will take place on Tuesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Leicester Rosary Catholic Church, and entombment will be at the Leicester Crossroads Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lackford Brothers Funeral Home. Matthew Durangett, also known as Soft Tire, of Moran St. John, who resided at St. George's Estate, passed away on Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, at the age of 77. He was the father of Paul Badassi, Doreen Benjamin, Evelyn Badassi, Ted Badassi, Joycelyn Francis, Dexter Badassi, and Gracelyn Griffith. Grandfather of 20 including Osbert, Wendy, and Shrika. Great-grandfather of 18. Great-great-grandfather of 2. Brother of Peter, Isaiah, Solomon and Norris in Grenada, and George in England. Father-in-law of Peter Benjamin, Henry Hazard, Leo Francis, and Trevor Griffith. Brother-in-law of Yvonne, Balbobim, Kuman Singh, and Isaac in Trinidad. Uncle of many including James and Albert. Other relatives and friends including Kentuff and the boys by the shop, the Williams family, the Badassi and Durangett families of Moran and Lamode, and friends and relatives of Moran and Lamode. The funeral service for the late Matthew Durangett, also known as Soft Tire, of Moran St. John, who resided at St. George's Estate, will take place on Tuesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Beaulieu Seventh-day Adventist Church, and entombment will be at the Beaulieu Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lackford Brothers Funeral Home. Ted Roy Badassi, also known as Bungsin, of St. George Estate, St. George, died on Friday, November 4th, 2022, at the age of 56. Left to mourn 2 brothers, Paul in Grenada and Dexter in Trinidad. 4 sisters, Doreen Benjamin, Joycelyn Francis, Evelyn Badassi, and Gracelyn Griffith. Brothers-in-law, Peter Benjamin, Henry Hazard, Leo Francis, and Travon Griffith. Many nieces and nephews including Osbert, Tricia, Desiree, Sharika, Wendy, Kevin, Marvin, Junior, Diane, Neil, and Vanessa. Uncles Balbulbin, Kumansing, Isaac in Trinidad, Peter, Isaiah, Solomon, Norris in Grenada, and George in England. Aunt Yvonne. Other relatives and friends including Marcock, Trevor, Tony, Kentoff, Walter Delbert, the Durangett and Badassi families of Moran and Lamode, the boys by the shop, and friends and neighbors of St. George Estate and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Ted Roy Badassi, also known as Bungsin, of St. George Estate, St. George, will take place on Tuesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Beaulieu Seventh-day Adventist Church, and entombment will be at the Beaulieu Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Francis Christopher Pear, also known as Broco and Pops of Back Street, Tempe, St. George, passed away on Wednesday, November 16, 2022, at the age of 71. He was the husband of Catherine Teresa Jesslyn Pear, father of Japhet, Shem, Arvin, Eva, and Achim, stepfather of Thaddeus, grandfather of Shammah, Javel, Shemaiah, Jaden, and Levi, son-in-law of Ida and Twine, brother of Joanna, David, Augustus, Samuel, and Michael Pear, father-in-law of Nerissa, Shane, and Keisha, uncle of many including Catherine Pear in Canada, brother-in-law of Lucille Glaude, Jenny Thomas, Shanta Cox, Cindy, Denise and Petra Williams, Glenroy, Jovis and Trevor Bartholomew, Neil and Andy Williams. Many cousins, other relatives and close friends, including the Pear family of Marast Hill, the Nicholas family of Grandmole, the Dotton and Vento families of Tempe, Bellevue, and Boca, Jacqueline Glaude and family, the Rocher family of Calavini, Margaret Bartholomew, Elvira Mitchell, Dr. Francis Martin, and the pastors and members of the Latter Rain Revival Center, and the community of Backstreet, Tempe, and surrounding areas. The funeral service for the late Francis Christopher Pear, also known as Broco and Pops, of Backstreet, Tempe, St. George, will take place on Tuesday, December 6th at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Garden of Remembrance Funeral Chapel, Cemetery Hill, St. George's, according to Pentecostal rites, and interment will be at the St. George's Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Kenson Peters, also known as KP and Fudgy, of Malmount, who resided at Laton St. David, an employee of Calavini Island, passed away on Monday, November 7th, 2022, at the age of 30, left to mourn his parents, Rhonda and Stephen Peters, adopted daughter, Sadie Joseph, sisters Alice Marcel, Talisha Charles, Felissa, and Daniela Peters, brothers Kenroy, Patrick and Stevenson Peters, Anton Simon, and Sean Joseph, close and dear friend, Kelsey Noel, aunts Chelsea, Diane, Angela, Maria, Selena, and Nestor, uncles Raphael, Wavell, Glenroy, Jason, and Justin, nieces and nephews Kamosha, Keda, Odisha, Ava, Odian, and KJ, cousins Jarvin, Tamara, and Kevin, sister-in-law Marjorie Joseph, brother-in-law Raul Marcel, other relatives and friends Mr. and Mrs. Cohen, Paul, Kelton, Javon, Jason, Danny, Theodore, Williams, Mr. Earl Maitland, Sherry-Ann, Cindy, Sheldon, Troy, Makita, and Miss Noel and family, Joseph Ragbasing, the Elcock family, the boys at Cafe, Latante, Malmount, Calavini Island, and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Kenson Peters, also known as KP and Fudgy, of Malmount, who resided at Latante St. David, will take place on Wednesday, December 7th at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the St. Martin de Porres Roman Catholic Church, Crowshoe, and interment will be at the Churchyard Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Chrysostom English, also known as Chris of Riversally St. Patrick, passed away on Saturday, 19th November, at the age of 69. He was the husband of Lucia, father of Fabian Paul and his sister of Telescope, stepfather of Marcia and Jude, brother of Gemma and Caesar, uncle of many, caregivers Leroy Roberts and Frederica John. Many cousins, other relatives and close friends including the English, Nyack, and Simon families of Plains, Riversally, the Clement and Joseph families of Carriacou, the Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, Grenville, friends and neighbors of Riversally and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Chrysostom English of Riversally St. Patrick will take place on Wednesday, 7th December at 1 p.m. The funeral service will be held at Lacqua Brother Chapel, Grenville St. Andrew, according to Jehovah's Witness rites, and the interment will be at the Granbrook Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Anthony Modeste, also known as Tony or Keyfoot, of Mungo Road, Guelph St. John, passed away on Thursday, 17th November, at the age of 69. He was the husband of Barbara Hopkin Modeste, father of Crispin Tito Hopkin in the UK and Owen Ashton in Grenada, father-in-law of Alison Hopkin and Horace Ashton, grandfather of Elisha Hopkin, Jaden and Owen Ashton Jr., stepfather of David, Sean, Gavin, and Sherry Hopkin, step-grandfather of many in Barbados, Grenada, and the USA, brother of Mosley Pear, also known as Mongoose, and William Modeste, also known as Willie, uncle of Gemma, Jennifer, Junior, Cheryl, Winnie, Patsy, Willie, Judith, Marva, Rosemary, Tisha, Arnold, Dawn, Glenna, Shirley, Floris, Shirley-Ann, and Matthew, uncle of many in Grenada, the UK, and the USA, brother-in-law of Anne Daisy Modeste, Grace Modeste, Yvette, Maureen, and Donna Hopkin, James, Christopher, Michael Hopkin, and Gregory Hector. Other relatives and friends included Mr. Neptune, Paul Modeste, Cecilia St. Paul and family, the Hopkin family in the UK and Grenada, the Modeste family in the UK, USA, and Grenada, Mrs. Gloria Harak, Alwyn and St. Charles in St. Croix, Ronnie Hostin, the Peters family, Dennis Bernard, Uris Baptiste, Dennis Augustine, Arthur Hostin, Lorna Samuel, friends, relatives, and neighbors of Mungo Road and Guelph. The funeral of the late Anthony Modeste of Mungo Road, Guelph St. John, will take place on Friday, 9th December at 1 p.m. The funeral service will be held at St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, Guelph St. John, and the interment will be at the Douglaston Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home.
Anthony Thomas Radix of River Road, St. George, who resided in Ocala, Florida, passed away on Saturday, November 5th, 2022, at the age of 87. He was the husband of Esther Francis Radix, father of Mark, Michelle, and Yolande, grandfather of 3, great-grandfather of 4, brother of Dora Radix in the USA, father-in-law of April Radix in Florida, uncle of Valerie Lacrette, Bernadette Mitchell, Richie Lacrette, and Ian Lacrette in the USA. Many cousins, other relatives and friends, including friends and neighbors in Grenada and the USA. The funeral of the late Anthony Thomas Radix of River Road, St. George, who resided in Ocala, Florida, will take place in Ocala, Florida. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Vernal Collins, also known as Teacher Collins and Papa, of Mount Plaisir, who resided at Upper Depardine Street, Guelph, St. John, and in Miami, Florida, passed away on Saturday, November 12th, 2022, at the age of 83. The funeral arrangements for the late Vernal Collins, also known as Teacher Collins and Papa, of Mount Plaisir, who resided at Upper Depardine Street, Guelph, St. John, and in Miami, Florida, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Lyris Louisa Bowen, also known as Tanti Lyris, Sassy, Grandma and Dudu, of Marianne St. George, passed away on Friday, November 11th, 2022, at the age of 97. The funeral arrangements for the late Lyris Louisa Bowen, also known as Tanti Lyris, Sassy, Grandma and Dudu, of Marianne St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Anna Cador, also known as Mama, of Grand Roy St. John, passed away on Sunday, November 20th, 2022, at the age of 91. The funeral arrangements for the late Anna Cador, also known as Mama, of Grand Roy St. John, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Keith David Caliste, also known as Kesor, and Kesor Ball, of Palmrose St. David, passed away on Tuesday, 8th November 2022 in Canada, at the age of 62. The funeral arrangements for the late Keith David Caliste, also known as Kazar and Kazar Ball of Pomeroy St. David, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Francis Mitchell Kim Andel, well known as Kim and Pei of Victoria St. Mark, passed away on Monday 21st November 2022. The funeral arrangements for the late Francis Mitchell Kim Andel, well known as Kim and Pei of Victoria St. Mark, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lackwell Brothers Funeral Home. Percival Kenneth Alexander, also known as Paul O. of Snellhall St. Patrick, passed away on Sunday, November 20th, 2022, at the age of 92. The funeral arrangements for the late Percival Kenneth Alexander, also known as Paul O. of Snellhall St. Patrick, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lackwell Brothers Funeral Home. Muriel Albertina Taylor of Griffin Lane, Grenville St. Andrew, passed away on Thursday, November 24th, 2022, at the age of 88. The funeral arrangements for the late Muriel Albertina Taylor of Griffin Lane, Grenville St. Andrew, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Wayne's Funeral Services Limited. Desmond Collins, also known as Casey or Carlo, of Old Wester Hall, St. David, died on Sunday, November 27th, 2022, at the age of 66. The funeral arrangements for the late Desmond Collins, also known as Casey or Carlo, of Old Wester Hall, St. David, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Joseph Cummins, also known as Brother Cummins of Brunswick, Carriacou, passed away on Thursday, 24th November, at the age of 93. The funeral of the late Joseph Cummins, also known as Brother Cummins, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lackwell Brothers Funeral Home. Pearl Edmond of Belmont, who resided at Strananglais, St. George, passed away on Monday, 28th November, at the age of 61. The funeral arrangement of the late Pearl Edmond will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Linton Oliver of Beckway, resided in Carriacou and Grand Mall, St. George, passed away on Monday, 28th November, at the age of 86. The funeral of the late Linton Oliver of Beckway, who resided in Carriacou and Grand Mall, St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lackwell Brothers Funeral Home.
Fiona Frances Worm of St. Jules and Grand Ball, who resided at River Road, St. George, passed away on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, at the age of 54. The funeral arrangements for the late Fiona Frances Worm of St. Jules and Grand Mall, who resided at River Road, St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Rudolph Walker of Bendham, St. George, who resided in Alabama, USA, passed away on Thursday, 27th October 2022, at the age of 62. He was the husband of Eddie Mae Walker, brother of Wilma Nelson, uncle of Jermaine Walker, Alec and Alina Nixon. Many cousins, relatives, and close friends in Grenada, Trinidad, Canada, England, and the USA, including Samuel, Roll and Cecil, Sandyford, Justin, Ingrid, Valerie, Darlington, the Marichaud family, John Charles and family, the Frank family, and neighbors and friends of Vendham. A memorial service for the late Rudolph Walker of Vendham, St. George, who resided in Alabama, USA, will take place in the USA. Arrangements entrusted to Lackwell Brothers Funeral Home. In loving memory of Fabian Gabriel Mitchell, on this, the 4th anniversary of his death, with everlasting love, we remember our beloved husband, father, uncle, grandfather, brother, cousin, mentor, counselor, teacher, and friend, who died in grace on December 6, 2018. Fabian's laughter always filled the room and still rings out so easily in our hearts. He lived his life to the fullest with passion, energy, generosity, and love. We give God thanks for his life and the stories and wisdom he shared with us. May he continue to rest softly in perpetual peace. Funeral arrangements and military interment were overseen by Bailey's Funeral Home.
The management and staff of MTV extend deepest condolences to those of you whose loved ones have passed on. Thank you for watching.
Hello, I'm Pastor Eddie Lawrence from Alabama in the United States and a personal friend of Pastor Happy Casey's. I understand you may be going through a very difficult time today. I want to encourage you with a scripture from God's Word. The Lord says that He is near to those whose hearts are broken. Obviously, with the loss that you are enduring, your heart is broken, and He came to heal those whose hearts are broken. And though you may not feel God's presence, rest assured, He said He would be near to you because your heart is broken. There's a scripture in 1 Peter chapter 5:7 that may be comforting to you during this time. You may have lost a husband or a spouse, a wife, a father, mother, brother, sister, close friend. Jesus said in 1 Peter 5:7 to cast your cares upon Him because He cares for you. Just like the boats out in the harbor here in the St. George area. When storms and winds come, in order to be secure where they're anchored, they have to make sure that anchor grabs solid ground underneath and the boat can become stabilized. I encouraged you in these days of sadness and grief to let Jesus be the anchor in your life. He'll give you stability during these stormy days. I pray God's blessings over you, and may you feel the peace of God fill in your heart, and may it fill your mind and pass all understanding. May you know that God loves you and that He is with you.